The air was heavy with anticipation as the lawyer cleared his throat, the rustling of papers the only sound breaking the tense silence in the room. Sarah's 3 children sat around the mahogany table, their expressions a mix of impatience and mild irritation. Liam, the eldest, fidgeted with his tie, his phone buzzing silently in his pocket. Nora, the middle child, flipped through emails on her tablet, her perfectly manicured nails tapping softly against the screen. Ethan, the youngest, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his face a mask of indifference. None of them appeared grief-stricken. If anything, they seemed more concerned about what they were about to receive. "Let's begin," the lawyer announced, adjusting his glasses as he began to read Sarah's will aloud. For the first few moments, it was all standard fare, funeral arrangements, token gestures to a local charity, and the settlement of outstanding debts. Then, the tone shifted. The lawyer's voice wavered ever so slightly as he reached a particular clause, his eyes flicking nervously toward the children before continuing. "To my beloved community of Chestnut Street," he read, "I leave my house, the place where my happiest memories were made, to be converted into a resource center for struggling families and elderly individuals who need a second chance at life." The words landed like a bombshell. Liam's face turned crimson, Nora dropped her tablet with a clatter, and Ethan sat upright, his casual demeanor evaporating. "What?" Liam barked, slamming his hands on the table. "She left the house to strangers? To the neighborhood? That's insane." The lawyer raised a hand to calm him but didn't stop reading. "To my children, Liam, Nora, and Ethan," he continued, "I leave this message. You abandoned me when I needed you most, but I hope this decision will inspire you to reflect on what truly matters in life. My love for you never wavered, even when yours did. Perhaps, one day, you'll understand." The room fell silent. Liam looked like he might explode, Nora's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Ethan simply stared at the table, his jaw clenched. None of them spoke as the lawyer concluded with the standard legal formalities. Finally, he set the papers down and said, "There's also a video message she requested to be played." The screen on the far wall flickered to life, and there she was, Sarah, in a simple floral dress, sitting in the garden she loved so dearly. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held a sadness that cut through the screen. "If you're watching this," she began, "it means I'm gone, and you're hearing what I couldn't bring myself to say while I was alive." As her words unfolded, the story of Sarah's life began to emerge, one that was much richer and more complex than her children had ever bothered to understand. She spoke of the joy she felt raising them, the sacrifices she made after their father passed, and the pride she took in their achievements. But she also spoke of the pain, of missed phone calls, forgotten birthdays, and the growing distance that broke her heart a little more each day. "You 3 were my world," she said, her voice trembling. "But somewhere along the way, I became an afterthought in yours. I don't blame you entirely, life is busy, and it's easy to take love for granted. But I want you to know, I was still here. I was always here, waiting." Her children watched, frozen, as she spoke of the loneliness that had consumed her final years. Yet, there was no anger in her tone, only a quiet resignation. "I hope the choices I've made in this will help you see what's truly important," she said. "Because in the end, it's not about wealth or success. It's about the connections we cherish, the love we nurture, and the legacy we leave behind." As the video ended, Sarah's image lingered on the screen for a moment before fading to black. The lawyer cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable. "That concludes the reading," he said. "If you have any questions." "I have plenty of questions." Liam snapped, pushing his chair back with a screech. "What gives her the right?" "She was our mother," Nora interrupted, her voice shaking. "She had every right." For the first time, Ethan spoke, his voice low and measured. "We failed her," he said, looking at his siblings. "And now we're paying the price." As they sat in stunned silence, the weight of Sarah's message began to sink in. They had come expecting an inheritance, but instead, they had been handed a mirror, a reflection of their own failures, and a challenge to do better. The question now was whether they would rise to meet it. The atmosphere in the lawyer's office remained thick with tension as Sarah's children left, each retreating to their own thoughts. Outside, the world seemed indifferent to the storm brewing in their hearts. Liam stormed off to his car, muttering under his breath, while Nora lingered for a moment, her eyes cast downward. Ethan, as always, played the role of the silent observer, though his hands trembled as he lit a cigarette, a habit he thought he'd long abandoned. Liam's anger was volcanic. He couldn't comprehend how their mother, the woman who had always doted on them, could make a decision so drastic and humiliating. His mind spun with justifications, excuses, and blame. She must have been influenced, he thought, convinced someone had manipulated Sarah into leaving her house to the community. He vowed to contest the will, already plotting his next steps with an aggressive determination. Meanwhile, Nora found herself drowning in a whirlpool of guilt and denial. Her mind replayed moments she'd long buried, Sarah calling to ask about her grandchildren's soccer games, Nora replying curtly that she was too busy to talk. There was always some pressing meeting, some imagined urgency that made her mother's needs feel insignificant. She tried to push the memories away, but they clung to her like shadows, growing heavier with every step she took. Ethan, however, was consumed by a different kind of turmoil. As the youngest, he had always felt closer to Sarah, but that closeness had eroded over the years. He remembered promising to visit her after she helped him through a rough patch in college, only to cancel at the last minute for a concert. Now, the weight of his choices pressed down on him like a boulder. Standing alone in the parking lot, he took another drag of his cigarette and stared at the fading sun, wondering if there was any way to atone. Back on Chestnut Street, the community was already abuzz with the news of Sarah's will. To the neighbors, it was a gift beyond measure. Sarah's home, with its warm yellow paint and garden brimming with roses and lavender, had always been a gathering place. On summer evenings, she would host tea parties for the elderly, sharing stories and laughter that spilled over into the street. For the children, her house was a wonderland filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies and shelves lined with books she encouraged them to borrow. Maria, Sarah's next-door neighbor and closest confidant, found herself overcome with a bittersweet mix of emotions. She was grateful for Sarah's generosity but heartbroken that her friend was no longer there to see the joy her gift would bring. She sat on her porch, clutching a handwritten letter Sarah had given her just weeks before her passing. It was brief but poignant. Dear Maria. If you're reading this, it means my time has come. Thank you for being my friend, my anchor, and my confidant. You've shown me that family isn't always about blood, it's about love, understanding, and kindness. Please, watch over my children. They've lost their way, but I hope they'll find it again someday. And please, help the community turn my home into a haven for those who need it most. With all my love. Sarah. Maria wiped a tear from her cheek and resolved to honor Sarah's wishes. She began reaching out to the neighbors, organizing meetings to discuss how to transform the house into the resource center Sarah had envisioned. For Liam, Nora, and Ethan, life carried on, but not without disruption. Liam threw himself into work, burying his anger beneath piles of contracts and deadlines. Yet, even his thriving career couldn't silence the nagging voice in his head, questioning whether he'd made a terrible mistake by dismissing his mother's needs for so long. Nora, unable to focus on her high-profile marketing job, found herself scrolling through old photo albums, each image a painful reminder of the warmth she had pushed away. Ethan, the most introspective of the three, began visiting Chestnut Street under the cover of darkness, standing outside Sarah's house as if the mere sight of it could offer him answers. One evening, Ethan noticed the lights in the house were on, and a small group of neighbors was inside. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached, his heart pounding. Maria answered the door, her face softening when she saw him. "Ethan," she said warmly, though her voice carried a hint of sadness. "It's good to see you." I just wanted to see the house," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "Come in," Maria said, stepping aside. "We were just talking about your mother." The living room looked almost the same, though some furniture had been moved to make room for the meeting. On the mantel, Sarah's favorite vase still held a bouquet of fresh flowers, and the faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. Ethan sat quietly as the neighbors shared stories about his mother. They spoke of her kindness, her wisdom, and the countless ways she had touched their lives. "She used to sit with my kids after school and help them with their homework," one woman said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I would have done without her. She was the first to welcome me when I moved here," an elderly man added. "She made me feel like I belonged." Ethan listened, his chest tightening with every word. He had always known his mother was kind, but he had never truly understood the extent of her impact. As the meeting concluded, Maria handed him an old, worn notebook. "She wanted you to have this," she said. Ethan opened it and recognized his mother's neat handwriting. It was a journal, filled with entries that spanned the last few years of her life. He flipped through the pages, catching glimpses of her thoughts and feelings. "Liam hasn't called in weeks. I hope he's doing well. Nora sent a text today. It was short, but it made me smile. Ethan promised to visit, but he cancelled again. I know he's busy, but I miss him." Each entry was a dagger to his heart, but it was the final pages that truly undid him. "I know my children love me in their own way, but I can't help feeling invisible sometimes. Still, I hold on to hope. Hope that they'll see me not as a burden but as someone who loves them unconditionally. Maybe one day they'll understand." Ethan closed the notebook, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he realized the depth of his mother's pain and the unwavering love she had carried for them, even as they drifted away. He left the house that night with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. Unbeknownst to him, his siblings were undergoing their own journeys of self-reflection. Liam, haunted by memories of Sarah's video message, began rereading old birthday cards and letters she had sent him over the years. Nora, inspired by a conversation with her eldest daughter, decided to take her family to Chestnut Street to see the community center. Slowly but surely, the pieces of their broken family were being drawn back together, connected by the memory of the woman they had all taken for granted. Ethan stood in front of the old house the next morning, his heart pounding in his chest. The dawn light bathed the familiar yellow paint in a soft glow, and the faint scent of Sarah's beloved roses wafted through the air. For years, this house had been a place of comfort, but now it felt like a monument to his failures. He clutched the journal Maria had given him the night before, the weight of his mother's words pressing heavily on his shoulders. Inside, Maria and a handful of neighbors were already busy preparing the house for its transformation into a community center. The living room had been rearranged, with furniture moved to create an open, welcoming space. Boxes of books, toys, and donated supplies lined the walls, waiting to be organized. Ethan hesitated at the door, unsure if he was ready to face the memories that lingered within these walls. Maria noticed him and smiled gently. "Ethan, you're back," she said, setting down a box of canned goods. "Come in. We could use an extra pair of hands." He stepped inside, feeling a mix of nostalgia and unease. The familiar creak of the floorboards beneath his feet brought back flashes of his childhood, Sarah baking cookies in the kitchen, the sound of her laughter as she read bedtime stories, the warm embrace she always had ready after a hard day. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago, buried under years of neglect and misplaced priorities. The wheels of change were in motion, but the true test was yet to come. As Ethan helped unpack boxes and arrange items, he listened to the neighbors talk about their plans for the center. They envisioned a space where struggling families could find resources, children could access tutoring and after-school programs, and elderly residents could gather for companionship. It was a vision that embodied everything Sarah had stood for: love, community, and selflessness. She always wanted to help people, Maria said, placing a stack of books on a newly assembled shelf. Even when she didn't have much herself, she found ways to give. This place will keep her spirit alive. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He hadn't realized how deeply his mother had connected with the community. While he and his siblings had drifted away, Sarah had built a second family here, one that cherished her in a way they had failed to. As the day wore on, Ethan found himself drawn to the journal again. During a quiet moment, he stepped into Sarah's old bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through the pages. He stopped at an entry written a few months before her passing. I saw Ethan standing outside the house today. He didn't come in, but it made me happy to know he was here. I wonder what's going through his mind. I miss him so much, but I don't know how to tell him without pushing him away. Maybe he'll come inside next time. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he read the words. He had been so wrapped up in his own life, his own excuses, that he hadn't realized how much his mere presence had meant to her. He closed the journal and took a deep breath, a surge of determination filling him. He couldn't change the past, but he could honor Sarah's memory by helping to carry out her vision for the house. Over the next few days, Ethan became a regular fixture at the house, throwing himself into the work with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He cleaned, painted, and organized, each task feeling like a small step toward redemption. The neighbors noticed his efforts and welcomed him with open arms, sharing stories about Sarah that only deepened his admiration for her. Word of Ethan's involvement eventually reached Liam and Nora, sparking a mixture of curiosity and resentment. Liam, still fuming over the will, dismissed it as a guilt-driven stunt. He's just trying to make himself feel better, he muttered to his wife. But deep down, a part of him wondered if he should follow suit. Nora, on the other hand, was more conflicted. She had been avoiding Chestnut Street, unable to face the reality of what they had lost. But when her eldest daughter, Emily, asked if they could visit the house, she found herself agreeing. When Nora arrived with Emily in tow, she was taken aback by how much progress had been made. The house was bustling with activity, and the air buzzed with a sense of hope and renewal. She spotted Ethan in the garden, tending to the rose bushes Sarah had so carefully cultivated. He looked up and saw her, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Nora," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I wasn't expecting you." "I wasn't expecting to come," she admitted, glancing around. "But Emily wanted to see it." Ethan nodded, understanding. "It's different, isn't it? But in a good way." Nora hesitated before responding. "It's what she would have wanted," she said softly, her voice tinged with regret. As the siblings stood in the garden, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They had all failed Sarah in their own ways, but perhaps there was still time to make amends, not just to her memory, but to each other. Later that evening, Liam finally gave in to his curiosity and visited the house. He arrived after most of the neighbors had gone, hoping to avoid an audience. As he stepped inside, he was struck by how much the house still felt like Sarah's. Despite the changes, her presence lingered in every corner, from the embroidered pillows on the couch to the faint scent of lavender in the air. Ethan and Nora were still there, sitting at the kitchen table with Maria. When they saw him, they exchanged surprised glances but said nothing. Liam sat down awkwardly, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking," he said after a long pause. "About what she said in the video. About us." Nora nodded, her eyes glistening. "Me too." Ethan placed the journal on the table, sliding it toward Liam. "You should read this," he said quietly. "It might help." Liam hesitated, then picked up the journal and flipped through the pages. As he read, the walls he had built around his guilt and anger began to crumble. The raw honesty of Sarah's words cut through his defenses, forcing him to confront the pain he had ignored for so long. For the first time in years, the three siblings talked, really talked. They shared memories, regrets, and tears, finding solace in their shared love for the woman they had lost. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a start. By the time they left the house that night, they were no longer just individuals grappling with their grief. They were a family, united by a common purpose, to honor Sarah's legacy and ensure her final gift to the community was realized. As they walked away, the light in the house's windows glowed warmly, a beacon of hope and redemption. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, they felt like they were on the right path. The weeks that followed were transformative for both Sarah's children and the community. The house on Chestnut Street was a hive of activity, with neighbors of all ages coming together to help turn Sarah's vision into reality. The process wasn't without its challenges. Permits had to be secured, repairs made, and countless logistical hurdles overcome, but each step forward felt like a tribute to the woman who had inspired it all. For Liam, Nora, and Ethan, the experience was both humbling and cathartic. Liam, who had always prided himself on being the problem solver, threw himself into the practical aspects of the project. He spent long hours coordinating with contractors, securing donations, and leveraging his business connections to bring in additional resources. It was his way of atoning, though he rarely spoke about the emotions that fueled his drive. One evening, as Liam worked late at the house, he found himself alone in what had once been Sarah's study. The room had been cleared out to make way for a new library, but a few of her personal belongings remained, including a small, framed photo of the family from years ago. In the picture, Sarah stood behind her children, her arms draped lovingly around them. Liam picked it up, his fingers tracing the outline of her face. He couldn't help but wonder what she would think of him now, if she'd be proud of the effort he was making or disappointed that it had taken her death to spur him into action. Meanwhile, Nora had taken on the role of community liaison, using her marketing skills to rally support for the center. She designed flyers, organized fundraisers, and reached out to local businesses for sponsorships. To her surprise, she found herself reconnecting with the people she had once dismissed as mere acquaintances. Conversations with neighbors revealed stories about Sarah she had never known, small acts of kindness that had left lasting impressions. One afternoon, Nora visited the local elementary school to deliver a presentation about the center. As she spoke to a group of students and parents, she noticed a little girl in the back row with wide, curious eyes. After the presentation, the girl approached her. "Mrs. Nora," the girl said shyly, "did you know your mom used to help me with my reading? She said I was really smart and that I just needed someone to believe in me." Nora knelt down, her throat tightening. "I didn't know that," she admitted. "But it sounds just like her." The girl beamed. "She was the nicest lady I ever met." That encounter stayed with Nora, sparking a newfound appreciation for the impact her mother had made, not just on the community, but on individual lives. It also deepened her resolve to ensure the center would become a place where others could find the same support and encouragement Sarah had offered so freely. Ethan, who had always been the most introspective of the three, found his role in the garden. Sarah's roses, which had long been a symbol of her care and attention, had begun to wilt in the weeks after her passing. Ethan took it upon himself to revive them, spending hours tending to the soil, pruning the bushes, and carefully watering each plant. The work was therapeutic, giving him a sense of connection to his mother that he hadn't felt in years. As the garden began to bloom once more, Ethan decided to create a memorial space for Sarah in the center of the yard. He enlisted the help of a local artist to design a small statue, a figure of a woman holding an open book, surrounded by roses. Beneath the statue, a plaque bore the inscription, "In loving memory of Sarah, who gave without measure." The unveiling of the statue became a community event, drawing neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had been touched by Sarah's story. Liam, Nora, and Ethan stood together as Maria gave a heartfelt speech about Sarah's legacy. "She taught us that love isn't just about words, it's about actions, Maria said, her voice trembling with emotion. Sarah didn't just talk about kindness, she lived it. And now, through this center, we can carry her spirit forward. As Maria finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause. Liam glanced at his siblings, feeling a sense of unity he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he saw them not as competitors or burdens, but as allies in a shared mission. After the ceremony, the siblings lingered in the garden, watching as children played and neighbors mingled. The house felt alive again, filled with the warmth and laughter that had defined Sarah's presence. Mom would have loved this, Ethan said, his voice tinged with both pride and sadness. She would have, Nora agreed, wiping away a tear. And she would have loved seeing us here together. Liam nodded, his usual stoicism giving way to a rare moment of vulnerability. We've got a lot to make up for, he admitted. But maybe this is a start. As the weeks turned into months, the community center became a cornerstone of Chestnut Street. It offered free tutoring for children, a food pantry for struggling families, and weekly gatherings for seniors. The siblings remained actively involved, each contributing in their own way. Liam used his business acumen to secure ongoing funding, Nora continued to foster community relationships, and Ethan led gardening workshops, teaching others the skills his mother had passed down to him. Their involvement in the center didn't erase the mistakes of the past, but it gave them a way to channel their grief and guilt into something meaningful. It also brought them closer as a family, allowing them to heal the rifts that had divided them for so long. One evening, as the sun set over Chestnut Street, the siblings sat together on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. The air was filled with the scent of roses and the sound of laughter, a reminder that, even in the face of loss, life had a way of blooming anew. For Liam, Nora, and Ethan, the journey wasn't over, but they had taken the first steps toward redemption. And in the house that Sarah had loved so deeply, her spirit lived on, inspiring everyone who walked through its doors to believe in the power of love, kindness, and second chances. Months had passed since the unveiling of the community center, and Chestnut Street was transforming in ways no one had anticipated. The house that once felt heavy with Sarah's absence was now a beacon of hope and joy. Children gathered in the library after school, seniors held weekly craft sessions in the sunlit living room, and families in need found comfort in the food pantry stocked through the community's collective generosity. For Liam, Nora, and Ethan, the center had become more than a project, it was a lifeline. The work demanded their time and energy, but it also gave them a sense of purpose they had each been missing. Their late nights of planning, problem-solving, and sometimes heated debates had fostered a connection they hadn't shared since childhood. But despite the progress, there were still challenges to face. One such challenge came when a local developer expressed interest in buying several properties on Chestnut Street, including the community center. The developer, a sharp-suited man named Charles Hayden, presented an enticing offer, a hefty sum that could fund numerous community initiatives elsewhere. The proposal sparked heated debate among the siblings and the community. Liam, ever the pragmatist, saw the financial potential. We could help more people with that money, he argued during a meeting. Think about what Mom would want, she cared about the community, not just this house. Ethan, however, was staunchly opposed. This isn't just a house, Liam, he said, his voice rising. It's her legacy. Selling it would erase everything we've worked for. Mom wanted this place to bring people together, not to be torn down for another strip mall. Nora found herself caught in the middle, her diplomatic nature struggling to reconcile their opposing views. She listened to both sides, trying to weigh the practical benefits against the emotional and symbolic value of the center. The community was equally divided. Some saw the developer's offer as a lifeline, a way to address broader needs. Others, like Maria, were fiercely protective of the center and its role as a gathering place for the neighborhood. Amid the turmoil, an unexpected discovery shifted the narrative. While sorting through boxes in the attic, Ethan found a sealed envelope addressed to "My children." The envelope, worn and yellowed with age, had been tucked away in a box of Sarah's keepsakes. Ethan gathered Liam and Nora at the house that evening, and together, they opened the letter. Sarah's familiar handwriting filled the page, her words a mix of tenderness and quiet strength. My dear Liam, Nora, and Ethan. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to guide you in person. But I hope you'll find my words a comfort as you navigate the choices ahead. Life is full of difficult decisions, and I know you'll face them with the courage and love I tried to instill in you. This house has always been more than bricks and mortar. It's a home, a refuge, and a symbol of what we can accomplish when we come together. I dreamed of it becoming a place where others could find the same comfort and support it gave us. But I also know that legacies aren't bound to places, they live on in the people we touch and the choices we make. Whatever you decide, remember that the heart of this home isn't the walls or the garden, it's the love that built it. That love lives in each of you. Trust yourselves, trust each other, and know that I am proud of you, always. By the time they finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye among them. Sarah's words reminded them of what truly mattered, not the house itself, but the values it represented. The next day, they called a community meeting to discuss the letter and decide the center's future. Ethan read the letter aloud, his voice trembling with emotion. The room fell silent as the weight of Sarah's message settled over the group. After a long discussion, a consensus began to emerge. They would keep the center, but expand its mission to honor Sarah's vision of helping as many people as possible. Liam suggested creating satellite programs in other neighborhoods, using the center as a hub. Nora proposed a scholarship fund for local students, financed through fundraisers and partnerships. Ethan, inspired by the garden's success, offered to teach gardening skills to other communities. With renewed determination, the siblings and the community rallied to make these ideas a reality. The developer's offer was declined, and instead, they launched a campaign to raise funds for the expanded programs. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, not just from Chestnut Street, but from people across the city who had heard Sarah's story and wanted to support her legacy. The campaign culminated in a grand celebration at the center. The siblings stood together as a diverse crowd filled the house and spilled out into the garden. Maria, who had become the unofficial heart of the center, delivered a speech that captured the spirit of the event. This house is a testament to what we can achieve when we come together, she said. It's not just Sarah's legacy, it's ours. And together, we will keep it alive for generations to come. As the crowd cheered, Liam, Nora, and Ethan exchanged a look of quiet pride. They had come a long way from the fractured family they once were. Through the challenges, disagreements, and moments of doubt, they had found a way to honor their mother's memory while forging a path forward. That night, as they sat on the porch and watched the celebration unfold, Ethan spoke what they were all feeling. She was right, he said, his voice soft but steady. It's not about the house, it's about the love that built it. And that love is still here. Nora smiled, leaning against him. It always will be. Liam nodded, his gaze fixed on the glowing lights strung across the garden. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. In the months and years that followed, the community center flourished. It became a model for other neighborhoods, inspiring similar projects across the city. The siblings remained deeply involved, their bond strengthened by the journey they had shared. And through it all, the house on Chestnut Street stood as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. Sarah's dream had not only come true, it had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. And in the hearts of those who knew her, her legacy lived on, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward. Changing lost the years past, the community center on Chestnut Street became more than a fixture of the neighborhood, it became a symbol of what could be achieved through love, unity, and shared purpose. The siblings, once scattered and emotionally distant, found themselves drawn closer not only to each other but to the people whose lives had been transformed by the center's existence. The center's success story spread far beyond their little corner of the city, inspiring countless others to create spaces of connection and support. But no success story is without its struggles, and the challenges of maintaining and expanding the center tested the siblings in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the center grew, so did the demands on their time and resources. Liam's ambitious plans for new programs often clashed with Ethan's insistence on staying true to their mother's simple vision. Nora found herself caught in the middle, trying to balance Liam's pragmatism with Ethan's idealism while ensuring the community's voice remained at the heart of every decision. One particularly divisive issue arose when a tech company offered to fund the construction of a modern wing for the center, complete with state-of-the-art facilities. In exchange, the company wanted to brand the wing with its logo and use the center as a promotional tool. The offer was lucrative, and Liam saw it as an opportunity to secure the center's financial future. Ethan, however, was vehemently opposed, arguing that it would commercialize their mother's legacy and compromise the center's values. The debate reached a breaking point during a late-night meeting in the center's library. Liam paced the room, frustration evident in his every movement. "We're not just running a sentimental project here, Ethan," he said, his voice sharp. "We're running a community center. It takes money to keep the lights on, to pay staff, to expand our reach. This deal could set us up for years." Ethan stood firm, his arms crossed. "And at what cost? Slapping a corporate logo on this place doesn't honor Mom, it cheapens everything she stood for. This isn't about the bottom line, Liam. It's about people." "Enough," Nora interjected, her tone weary but resolute. "This isn't just about what Mom would have wanted, it's about what's best for the community. And we're not going to find that answer by tearing each other apart." After hours of tense discussion, they reached a compromise. They would accept funding from the tech company but with strict conditions. The branding would be subtle, and the company would not have control over the center's operations or programs. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was one that allowed them to move forward without losing sight of their principles. The incident highlighted the delicate balance required to keep the center thriving while staying true to its roots. It also forced the siblings to confront the lingering tensions between them and to acknowledge the different ways they had interpreted their mother's vision. Over time, these conflicts became opportunities for growth, deepening their understanding of each other and strengthening their shared commitment to the center's mission. Meanwhile, the community center continued to evolve, becoming a vibrant hub for education, art, and social services. The library, once a modest collection of donated books, grew into a learning resource center equipped with computers, tutors, and workshops. The garden expanded into a full-fledged urban farm, providing fresh produce for the food pantry and teaching residents how to grow their own food. One of the most impactful additions was a mentorship program for at-risk youth, inspired by the countless stories of lives Sarah had quietly touched. The program paired young people with mentors from the community, offering guidance, support, and opportunities to explore their talents. It wasn't long before the program began producing success stories of its own, teens who had once struggled with school or family issues finding direction and achieving goals they never thought possible. As the center flourished, so did the siblings' lives. Liam found a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced in the corporate world, discovering that his skills could be used to make a tangible difference. Nora, once restless and unsure of her place, became a respected community leader, her knack for bringing people together earning her admiration and trust. Ethan, who had long felt overshadowed by his siblings, found his voice as an advocate for sustainability and social justice, using the center as a platform to promote causes he cared about. Despite their busy schedules, the siblings made it a point to come together every week for a family dinner at the center. These gatherings became a cherished tradition, a time to reflect on their journey and to remember the woman whose love had brought them to this point. One evening, as they sat around the dining table in the garden, Nora brought out an old photo album she had found while organizing the center's archives. The album was filled with pictures of their mother, many of which they had never seen before, Sarah teaching a young girl how to read, tending to her roses, laughing with neighbors during a community barbecue. As they flipped through the pages, the siblings were struck by how much of their mother's life they had missed or taken for granted. But rather than feeling regret, they felt gratitude for the chance to carry her legacy forward. "You know," Liam said, his voice soft, "I used to think success was about what you could achieve for yourself. But Mom, she taught us that the real measure of a life is what you do for others." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on a photo of Sarah in the garden, her face radiant with joy. "She didn't just tell us to be better," he said. "She showed us how. And she's still showing us," Nora added, her eyes glistening with tears. "Through this place, through the people we've met, through everything we've built together. She's still here." As the sun set over Chestnut Street, casting a golden glow over the garden, the siblings sat in comfortable silence, their hearts full. The journey had been long and often difficult, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. In honoring their mother's memory, they had found themselves, and each other. The community center stood as a testament to Sarah's unwavering belief in the power of love, kindness, and connection. And as the lights twinkled in the garden and laughter filled the air, it was clear that her spirit would continue to guide and inspire for generations to come.